What if everything we've been taught about our origins is incomplete? Not wrong exactly, but missing the most important chapters. Because beneath the familiar narrative of human progress lies a far stranger truth, one written in stone, encoded in DNA, and whispered through myths that span every culture on Earth. We are not the first, we may not even be the seventh. Before I continue, I'm curious. Where in the world are you right now? What time of night has brought you here? And remember, the images accompanying this journey are merely visual companions, not literal representations. Thank you for choosing to explore this with me. Now, let's begin where all mysteries must, with the evidence that doesn't fit. Picture this: complex monumental structures appearing in the historical record without warning. No trial runs, no learning curve, no primitive prototypes, just sophisticated engineering materializing as if downloaded fully formed into civilizations barely removed from hunter-gatherer societies. Ancient astronomers tracking celestial movements with precision that rivals our modern instruments. Stone monuments aligned to stellar configurations visible only across millennia. Mathematical relationships encoded in pyramids and temples that suggest knowledge far beyond what official timelines permit. Something is deeply wrong with the story we've been told. Travel to the world's most remote places and you'll find them. Ruins without parent cultures. Stonework exhibiting machine-level precision in eras before machines existed. Submerged structures arranged in geometric perfection beneath hundreds of feet of ocean. And most disturbing, artifacts recovered from geological layers millions of years too old for human existence. Researchers scramble to explain these contradictions. Misdated, they say, misunderstood, misinterpreted. But the anomalies multiply faster than the explanations, all pointing toward the same forbidden conclusion. Something came before, something organized, something powerful, and something ended so catastrophically that even its name was erased from time. No single disaster can achieve such complete annihilation. Fire alone leaves traces, water alone leaves survivors, ice alone preserves evidence, darkness alone cannot erase memory, but a sequence, a cascading chain of catastrophes, fire followed by flood, followed by ice, followed by centuries of darkness that can reset a world entirely. And it has happened before, not once, not twice, 6 times. Consider a different model of history, not a straight line of progress, but a wheel turning through ages. Civilizations ascend, flourish, expand, then collapse with such violence that continuity itself shatters. Those who survive flee to mountains, forests, caves, carrying knowledge fragments they no longer fully comprehend. When stability finally returns, their descendants build anew, believing themselves to be humanity's first chapter when they are merely the latest. Suddenly, the global myths begin to make sense. The flood narratives, the stories of fire from the sky, the tales of wandering survivors, the gods who arrive bearing knowledge that shouldn't yet exist. These aren't fantasies or allegories. They're trauma memories, passed mouth to mouth across thousands of generations, echoes of worlds that vanished in an instant. If this model holds true, we inhabit the 7th iteration of human civilization, and traces of the 6 that preceded us still linger, beneath oceans, under deserts, inside mountains, and written into our very biology. Evidence that institutions would prefer remained hidden, because once the public understands the pattern, everything changes. We're not at civilization's peak. We're standing on the rubble of societies that reached heights we can barely imagine. And if 6 worlds fell before ours, one question becomes unavoidable. What destroyed them, and what waits for us in the darkness of the next turning? Every scientific discipline begins with anomalies. Most get explained eventually. But some remain stubbornly unexplainable, sharp contradictions embedded in the smooth narrative of human history that refuse to disappear no matter how often they're dismissed. These are the out-of-place artifacts, objects recovered from geological context impossibly older than any accepted human timeline. Small things, mostly. Metal fragments, machined surfaces, carved implements. Yet each one whispers a possibility that challenges everything. Someone before us achieved technological sophistication we assume belongs exclusively to modernity. Metal cubes and gear mechanisms extracted from coal seams hundreds of millions of years old. Coal that formed from plant life existing long before humans appeared. Yet embedded within, Objects with flat surfaces, right angles, deliberate symmetry. Nature doesn't create such things. Someone manufactured them. Tools sealed in stone. Iron hammers exhibiting metallurgical purity beyond 19th century capability. Locked inside Cretaceous limestone. Brass vessels embedded in geological formations requiring millions of years to develop. Components resembling spark plugs trapped in volcanic ash, predating our species by hundreds of millennia. These aren't dating errors. The surrounding material has been analysed through multiple independent methodologies. The geological context is unambiguous. These objects simply do not belong where they've been found. Official explanations invoke contamination or hoax. And yes, sometimes contamination occurs, but when the pattern repeats across continents and epochs, when metallurgical analysis reveals alloys too advanced for their supposed age, when documentation mysteriously vanishes from public archives, coincidence becomes an insufficient explanation. A pattern emerges, faint but undeniable. This pattern intensifies when we examine what lies beneath the oceans. Sonar reveals linear grids in regions where no civilization should exist. Divers discover precisely fitted blocks, geometric terraces, channels exhibiting machine-carved characteristics. Official statements classify these as natural formations, but nature doesn't produce 90-degree intersections across mile-wide platforms. Nature doesn't construct harbour walls aligned to astronomical markers. The Earth remembers through fragments, a gear tooth here, a machined vessel there, a staircase descending into oceanic darkness. They feel like remnants from an erased world, traces small enough to survive the cataclysm that consumed it, yet durable enough to persist across tens of thousands of years. But here's what troubles researchers most. Not the artifacts themselves, but the reaction to them. Universities publish preliminary findings, then retract them. Museums store objects in unmarked backrooms without catalogue numbers. Laboratories report samples lost or contaminated. Government agencies suddenly restrict access to newly discovered sites, offering justifications that don't match the scale of their response. The pattern of suppression mirrors the pattern of discovery. This raises an uncomfortable question. Why would anyone want to hide evidence of ancient technology? One answer is simple institutional inertia. These objects threaten established timelines, and systems built around those timelines resist revision instinctively. But there's another answer, more disturbing. If previous civilizations possessed technology equivalent to, or surpassing ours, and if their collapse was sudden and total, then our sense of security is illusory. What happened to them could happen to us. That realization is harder to accept than a misdated artifact. Beneath the familiar story of humanity lies a timeline that refuses silence. It reveals itself through scattered fragments, unexplained anomalies, and memories appearing across disparate cultures as if transmitted from a single forgotten source. Viewed collectively, these pieces form a pattern, suggesting civilization is not a gradual climb, but a repeating wave: rise, fall, silence, rise again. Our textbooks present human progress as linear, beginning roughly 12,000 years ago with the first cities, laws, organized religion, written symbols etched into clay and stone. But Earth itself is far older than written memory, and it maintains a different record. Ice cores, ocean sediments, fossilized pollen, ancient shorelines, glacial scarring, extinct river systems, all hint at the same quiet possibility. Earth may have hosted multiple eras of complexity long before ours. What makes this compelling is nature's rhythmic character. Earth isn't static. It tilts, it wobbles, it cycles through heat and cold. Ice sheets advance and retreat. Sea levels drop hundreds of feet, then surge back. Volcanic ash blankets continents. Cosmic debris scatters across the atmosphere. Each time the planet shifts dramatically, life reorganizes. Civilizations arise on stable ground, thrive briefly, then collapse when stability shatters. If lost cultures existed before us, their ruins wouldn't sit conveniently on open plains awaiting discovery. They'd lie beneath oceans where coastlines once existed. They'd be buried under volcanic ash and compressed sediment. They'd sleep under glaciers. They'd hide beneath deserts that were once fertile grasslands. And in many places, that's exactly what we find. Geologists document abrupt climate transitions every 90,000 to 100,000 years. Biologists map population bottlenecks that nearly extinguished early humanity. Archaeologists quietly acknowledge strange gaps in the progression of toolmaking, agriculture, and architecture. One moment, our ancestors are simple hunter-gatherers. The next moment, megalithic structures appear requiring mathematics, astronomy, and engineering knowledge far beyond what should exist at that stage. Some researchers propose natural explanations for these leaps. Others suggest the timeline is incomplete. But there's a third possibility far more difficult to confront. What if earlier civilizations reached complexity similar to, or exceeding ours, then were erased by global upheaval so complete that only fragments remained? Fragments too scattered to rebuild a narrative, but too persistent to ignore. Stories from ancient cultures worldwide speak of great floods, prolonged darkness, cities swallowed by seas, fire falling from the sky, survivors wandering into new lands carrying only memory and knowledge fragments. These stories are dismissed as myth, but myth often grows from truth. When identical narratives appear in hundreds of places separated by oceans and language families, dismissing their shared core as coincidence becomes difficult. The deeper we travel into this forgotten timeline, another pattern emerges. Civilization seems to rise rapidly after each collapse, as if guided by lingering memories or inherited instincts. Skills appear fully formed. Mathematics re-emerges. Calendars synchronize with celestial cycles. Stonework returns with precision that astonishes modern architects. It's as though humanity isn't inventing from nothing, but rediscovering what it once knew well in another age. Long before archaeology uncovered submerged foundations, long before sonar traced forgotten coastlines, the most enduring evidence of earlier civilizations was already inside us, encoded in the human genome like a message in a drifting bottle, waiting to be read. Human DNA archives trial, error, survival, and adaptation. Most genes follow predictable patterns shaped by climate, diet, disease, and migration, but occasionally scientists encounter anomalies, genetic signatures that don't behave like ordinary mutations. One of the strangest is a trait cluster found in less than half of 1% of the global population. Too rare to be random, too consistent to be coincidence, too unusual to fit neatly within known branches of human ancestry. This cluster appears across groups that should have no connection. Certain highland Indian communities, isolated Southeast Asian coastal tribes, indigenous Australians in the far north, the Basque people of Western Europe, and scattered populations living near remnants of submerged civilizations. These groups share no recent history, no common language, no clear migratory link. Yet identical genetic markers appear in all of them. The traits themselves are extraordinary. Enhanced resistance to hypoxia, unusual endurance under physical strain, and mild but measurable enhancements in brain regions processing navigation, direction, and geometric understanding. What makes this stranger is that these traits don't appear as separate adaptations. They appear bundled, as if inherited from a shared ancestor. The neurological component draws particular attention. Brain imaging studies on individuals carrying this rare cluster show heightened activity in areas associated with memory encoding and environmental recognition. Not personal memory, but inherited pattern detection. The instinctive ability to orient oneself in unfamiliar landscapes, follow astronomical cues, track seasonal changes with unusual accuracy. These abilities don't guarantee intelligence. They're closer to quiet intuition, an internal compass pointing not toward directions, but toward something older. Some anthropologists suggest these traits emerge from high-altitude populations. Others propose interbreeding with extinct hominin groups. But these explanations falter because the genetic cluster appears where altitude is irrelevant, where archaic hominins didn't exist, and where environmental factors don't justify such adaptations. Instead, the pattern aligns with something older and more fragile. Survivors. Communities whose ancestors fled rising seas or falling ash or sudden darkness. Communities whose oral histories speak of journeys across drowned lands, abandoned cities swallowed by water. Celestial knowledge passed down without understanding its origin. Communities carrying memory fragments from worlds that no longer exist. The more scientists examine this cluster, the more unusual it becomes. One gene influences cellular repair in ways resembling adaptations found in deep-diving mammals. Another alters metabolic efficiency during periods of low sunlight. A third shows hints of ancient selective pressure that doesn't match any known climate shift of the last 50,000 years. All of this suggests not merely survival, but survival under extreme, cyclical, catastrophic conditions. And then comes the most unsettling observation. The cluster is becoming more active. Epigenetic markers on these sequences show signs of awakening, as if environmental conditions are beginning to resemble those that shaped the original carriers: rising carbon dioxide levels, shifting magnetic fields, changing climate rhythms. It's almost as though the genome remembers something the conscious mind doesn't. A warning engraved in biology, preparing for a returning pattern. For generations, the great monuments of the ancient world have been treated as triumphs of early civilization. The Egyptian pyramids, Peruvian megaliths, Mexican geometric complexes, Chinese pyramid fields, Cyclopean walls scattered across Europe and Asia. All studied, admired, continually reinterpreted. Yet the more carefully we examine these structures, the less they resemble the work of cultures rising from simplicity. Instead, they look like the last surviving remnants of knowledge that didn't begin with those civilizations, but ended with them. What makes these structures perplexing isn't simply their size. Humanity has always been capable of ambition. It's the precision that defies explanation. Stone blocks weighing dozens or hundreds of tons, cut with accuracy modern engineers struggle to reproduce. Faces aligned with astronomical markers down to fractions of a degree. Angles matching celestial cycles supposedly unknown at the time. And the deeper we excavate these foundations, the older the layers appear. Nowhere is this more evident than the Giza Plateau. Beneath the familiar limestone casing of the Great Pyramid lies a core far stranger and older than the surface suggests. The alignment to true north, the dimensional ratios, the geometry encoded in internal passages all imply mathematical sophistication that shouldn't have existed in the era of its official construction. Yet the pyramid stands not as a beginning, but as an echo, a monument whose surface may be younger, but whose design whispers of knowledge carried across a gulf of forgotten time. In South America, the story mirrors itself. At Sacsayhuaman, giant stone walls interlock like puzzle pieces. No mortar, no gaps, no consistent block size. Each stone is unique, shaped to fit its neighbour so precisely that even modern laser mapping cannot fully explain the method. The older layers lie beneath the Inca stonework, not above it. The Incas themselves claim they didn't build the foundation. They inherited it. Across the ocean, Teotihuacan's pyramids reveal another anomaly. Their layout mirrors the orbital spacing of planets in our solar system. The Pyramid of the Sun sits atop a cave modified into a perfect clover-shaped chamber. The avenue connecting structures aligns not with the solstice, but with the setting point of a specific star during a distant epoch. Whoever designed this city planned it with celestial knowledge far beyond the needs of an early agrarian society. In China, entire pyramid fields remain hidden beneath forested hills, officially classified as burial mounds but shaped with geometric exactness. Many orient towards celestial events no longer visible due to changes in Earth's axial tilt. Beneath several of these mounds, ground-penetrating scans reveal chambers constructed of stone blocks cut with the same precision seen in megalithic sites worldwide. The similarities aren't superficial, they're structural, foundational, intrinsic. Regardless of location, era, or culture, the oldest layers of the greatest monuments share identical characteristics. Enormous stones, interlocking joints, astronomical alignments, and an architectural style that feels learned rather than invented. It's as though every culture that rose after a great collapse found fragments of something older and used those fragments as models. They rebuilt what they could remember. They imitated what they didn't understand, and what they created became the monuments that have puzzled us for centuries. If all these structures were simply products of ingenuity, we'd expect to find a clear evolutionary path of construction. Yet there is none. The oldest structures are the most precise. The youngest often decline in accuracy. Techniques don't improve over time, they fade. This inversion isn't natural. Technology doesn't regress without cause, it regresses when knowledge is lost. If the monuments still standing on Earth's surface are echoes of something older, then the civilizations that built the originals must have risen and fallen long before recorded history. Unlike modern societies, which leave behind metals, plastics, and digital ghosts. These earlier worlds appear only in fleeting geological signatures, tool fragments, and memories preserved through myth. Their outlines are faint, but when placed together, they reveal a pattern far more complex than the simple story of humanity rising once from primitive origins. The first of these forgotten civilizations appears to have flourished in what is now Southeast Asia, when the Sunda Shelf formed a vast landmass connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. This region, now largely underwater, contains evidence of ancient river systems, fertile plains, and long coastlines, perfect for early settlement. Geologists estimate tens of millions could have lived there before rising seas consumed the land. If this culture mastered agriculture and coastal engineering, their disappearance in a catastrophic flood would explain both the archaeological silence and the flood myths originating across surrounding continents. Another civilization seems to have thrived in what is now the Sahara Desert, when it was a green expanse filled with lakes, rivers, and thriving ecosystems. Ancient rock art depicts boats, cattle, and human gatherings resembling organized societies. Beneath the sands, radar scanning has revealed geometric shapes and buried structures hinting at large settlements. This civilization may have been the bridge linking early African, Mediterranean, and Mesopotamian cultures, a hub erased when the desert expanded and consumed everything. Far to the north, the region between Siberia and Alaska, known as Beringia, offers another clue. During the last ice age, it was a temperate grassland supporting vast herds of megafauna and the human populations that hunted them. But what's rarely discussed is this landmass's scale and its potential for early development. Beringia wasn't merely a migration route. It was a homeland where unique adaptations emerged, perhaps even technologies suited to cold climates and large animal management. When sea levels rose, the entire region vanished beneath the Bering Strait, leaving behind only scattered genetic hints among northern populations. In the Indus Valley, ruins like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa show signs of advanced urban culture that seems to have appeared almost fully formed. Their grid layouts, drainage systems, uniform brick sizes, and standardized weights suggest a civilization inheriting knowledge rather than inventing it. Beneath the visible ruins lie older layers, less understood, hinting at a pre-existing culture that may have carried forward traditions from an even earlier age. Across the Mediterranean, the islands of Crete, Cyprus, Sardinia, and Malta contain ruins so old and complex they defy placement on accepted timelines. Some structures feature stonework reminiscent of sites thousands of miles away, suggesting a maritime culture with far-reaching influence. Massive harbour installations imply sophisticated navigation, trade networks, and possibly technologies that allowed manipulation of coastal environments. These cultures' collapse coincides with abrupt climate events, volcanic eruptions, and sudden sea level changes. The sixth, and perhaps most enigmatic civilization may have risen within the Amazon basin. Beneath the dense canopy, LIDAR scans reveal sprawling networks of roads, mounds, canals, and geometric earthworks extending hundreds of miles. The scale suggests not small villages, but a coordinated society capable of landscape engineering on a vast scale. If their knowledge revolved around biological systems, agriculture, or environmental harmony, their collapse may tie to climate shifts, disease, or drought, leaving behind jungle that swallowed their accomplishments. What connects all six civilizations isn't simply their disappearance, but the abruptness of their endings. They don't fade slowly from history, they vanish in geological instants. Floods, volcanic winters, sudden freezes, mega droughts, cosmic impacts. The precise cause varies, but the timing remains eerily consistent with Earth's natural cycles. Periods of stability lasting thousands of years end in moments of chaos that erase nearly everything. In each cycle, survivors scatter. They carry knowledge fragments, pieces of language, memory, and skill that reappear centuries later in cultures that seem far too advanced for their age. They rebuild what they can, they imitate what they lost, and eventually a new civilization rises in the ashes of the old, never realizing it's only the next chapter in a much older story. As the outlines of earlier civilizations grow sharper, another pattern emerges, one having nothing to do with geology or archaeology, and everything to do with human behavior. It shows itself in how discoveries vanish, how institutions respond, and how certain pieces of evidence are quietly removed from public reach. Researchers who study forbidden timelines speak of a phenomenon they call the disappearing trail. A diver maps a submerged structure, but images are confiscated before publication. A university team announces a discovery predating known civilization, and within weeks funding is cut, access restricted, and the story reframed as misinterpretation. Museum archives contain artifacts once displayed openly that now sit in unmarked drawers without catalogue numbers or provenance records. Even satellite data occasionally vanishes behind digital walls after sweeping over regions of interest. These incidents are dismissed as administrative mistakes, bureaucratic reshuffling, or simple coincidence. But coincidences rarely form repeating patterns, and here the pattern is unmistakable. The older the discovery, the more precise the craftsmanship, the more advanced the implied technology, the faster it disappears from public view. Why does this happen? Several possibilities exist, each unsettling in its own way. One is institutional inertia. Entire academic fields are built upon the idea that civilization began recently. If evidence contradicts this, it threatens careers, theories, textbooks, and the foundations of long-accepted narratives. It's easier to bury anomalies than rewrite the story. Another is national interest. Underwater ruins often lie near strategic coastlines. Ancient structures built on geological hotspots could have implications for energy research, military technology, or mineral exploration. Governments have a long history of classifying anything offering competitive advantage. But there's a third possibility, one aligning uncomfortably well with the global consistency of disappearance. The suppression is organised not to protect nations, but to protect stability itself. Because if the public learned that 6 civilizations rose before us, that each reached heights similar to or beyond our own, and that each collapsed abruptly, the implications would be profound. It would mean our modern world isn't unique. Our technologies aren't unprecedented. We're vulnerable to the same cyclical forces that erased those earlier ages. In this view, suppression isn't malicious, it's preventative. Those in power may believe they're shielding society from panic, protecting economies from collapse, buying time until humanity is prepared to confront the reality of its place in the cycle. If such groups exist, whether formal councils, loose networks of researchers, or hidden committees within governments, their influence appears in the same places: restricted access to ruins, classified satellite data, sudden closures of archaeological sites, research papers withdrawn without explanation, funding redirected away from anything threatening the accepted timeline. The pattern is global, not confined to any nation or political ideology. And the strangest part, the suppression often begins before a discovery can even be analysed. It's as though someone, somewhere, recognises the significance far faster than any academic committee could. Sonar scans flagged before divers reach the water, excavation permits denied before soil is disturbed, digital records wiped minutes after anomalies appear in public archives. Such efficiency suggests preparedness, a standing protocol waiting to be triggered. If traces of 6 forgotten worlds lie scattered beneath our feet, and if the 7th is what we now call modern humanity, then every clue gathered along this investigation points toward a single, inescapable conclusion. We're not at the beginning of our story. We're standing at the threshold of its next chapter. The 8th civilization isn't something waiting in the distant future. It's something already forming in the cracks of the present. Earth doesn't change suddenly without warning. It offers signs, subtle at first, then unmistakable for those who've learned to read them. Shifts in magnetic patterns, abrupt climate oscillations, rising oceans, weakening of long stable currents in atmosphere and sea. These transitions mirror the same markers that preceded earlier collapses, and they're happening again in our lifetime. Not on the scale of centuries, but decades. Carbon dioxide levels now exceed anything seen throughout the known history of humanity. Storms grow in frequency and ferocity. Ice sheets fracture at accelerated rates. Entire ecosystems shift their ranges in a single human generation. These changes are presented as environmental issues, scientific models, or political debates. But viewed in the context of long-forgotten cycles, they appear instead as something more ancient and more cyclical, the beginning of another great turning. If earlier civilizations were destroyed by floods, ash, cold, or heat, then our own age carries echoes of all these threats at once. Ocean levels creep upward toward coastlines where most of humanity now lives. Volcanic fields show renewed activity. The magnetic field continues to drift and weaken. Heat waves break records year after year. The signs don't guarantee catastrophe, but they mirror patterns of earlier collapses with unnerving accuracy. Yet even as the world tilts toward instability, something else stirs, a counterforce rising not in nature but in humanity itself. The rare genetic cluster carried by scattered populations across the globe, the strange inheritance of survivors from earlier cycles, is awakening. Epigenetic studies reveal increased activity in metabolic pathways once tied to endurance under extreme climatic stress. Neurological markers associated with spatial memory and environmental awareness show heightened development in younger generations. It's as though descendants of ancient survivors feel the cycle returning through instincts deeper than conscious thought. At the same time, technologies are emerging that resemble shadows of lost ages, not in form, but in function. We rediscover solar energy just as earlier. Civilizations seem to have harnessed the sun. We explore biological computing, echoing Amazonian earthworks that once shaped entire ecosystems. We unlock artificial intelligence, perhaps mirroring forgotten mechanisms hinted at in the geologic record and surviving myths of self-operating machines. It's possible that innovation in each age isn't invention but memory resurfacing. Cities rise higher, networks grow denser, information flows freely across continents. Humanity reorganizes itself into something more interconnected than ever before. These developments are often framed as progress, yet they may also be symptoms of a species unconsciously preparing for a new cycle. Each civilization rises swiftly near its end, as though pushed by forces it doesn't understand, driven to reach some threshold before the turning arrives. But the most profound question isn't whether the eighth civilization will rise, it's whether it will survive. Every prior cycle ended abruptly. Knowledge scattered, cities drowned, landscapes rewritten. Only fragments endured through survivors who carried memory in their blood and stories. Our cycle may not be different, unless our response is different. We possess something none of the earlier civilizations had, the ability to see the pattern, to look back across geological time, to examine remnants of earlier worlds, to understand that collapse isn't random but rhythmic, and to prepare not with fear but with awareness. The eighth civilization could be the first to break the pattern, the first to anticipate the turning, the first to protect its knowledge rather than lose it, the first to build with the understanding that nothing on Earth is permanent except change itself. But for that to happen, humanity must confront its true timeline. It must understand that it stands atop the ruins of many worlds, inheriting both the triumphs and mistakes of those forgotten ages. It must move forward with humility, curiosity, and willingness to rewrite everything we thought we knew. If we succeed, the eighth civilization may rise into an age unlike any before. If we fail, we'll become another silent layer in the earth, another whisper in myth, another lost world waiting to be rediscovered thousands of years from now. The cycle is returning. The signs are here. And the future will be shaped not by those who deny the past, but by those who dare to see it clearly. To understand what awaits us, we must first understand what destroyed them. The 6 civilizations that came before didn't simply fade away through gradual decline or societal collapse. They were annihilated, erased by forces so powerful that they rewrote the very face of the planet in a matter of days, months, or years. The geological record speaks clearly to those willing to listen. Within ice cores pulled from the deepest layers of Antarctica and Greenland, scientists have discovered something disturbing. Chemical signatures that tell stories of catastrophe. Thin bands of ash compressed between layers of ancient ice mark moments when volcanic eruptions darkened the sky across entire hemispheres. Spikes in cosmic dust suggest extraterrestrial impacts. Sudden shifts in oxygen isotopes reveal temperature drops so severe they would have made survival nearly impossible for complex societies. These aren't theoretical models, they're physical evidence of global devastation. Consider the Toba supervolcano eruption that occurred roughly 75,000 years ago. When this Indonesian volcano exploded, it released approximately 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. For comparison, that's more than 100 times the volume of Mount St. Helens. The ash cloud spread across the globe, blocking sunlight for years, perhaps decades. Temperatures plummeted, plant life withered. The human population bottlenecked to perhaps as few as 3 settlers to 10,000 individuals worldwide. If a civilization existed at the height of its power when Toba erupted, it would have been obliterated almost instantly. Not by the eruption itself, but by what followed. A volcanic winter lasting years, crop failures spanning continents, and the collapse of every system that complex societies depend upon. But volcanic eruptions are only one mechanism of destruction. The Younger Dryas event, occurring roughly 12,800 years ago, demonstrates another pathway to annihilation. In what appears to be a geological instant, global temperatures dropped dramatically. Ice sheets that had been retreating suddenly advanced. Sea levels fluctuated wildly. Megafauna across multiple continents went extinct. And according to many researchers, this cooling wasn't gradual. It happened within a single human lifetime, perhaps even within a few years. What caused such a rapid climate shift? Theories range from meteor impacts to massive meltwater pulses disrupting ocean currents. Some evidence points toward a cosmic airburst, a comet or asteroid fragmenting in the atmosphere and raining destruction across vast regions. Whatever the cause, the effect was unmistakable. The world changed so quickly that adaptation became impossible for many species, and perhaps for entire human civilizations. Then there are the floods, the great deluges remembered in virtually every ancient culture. When the last ice age ended, billions of tons of ice locked in glaciers began to melt. This wasn't a gentle, gradual process. It happened in catastrophic pulses. Massive ice dams holding back lakes the size of inland seas would suddenly fail, releasing walls of water that would dwarf any tsunami in recorded history. These meltwater pulses didn't just raise sea levels, they raised them by hundreds of feet in some regions, swallowing coastlines where millions might have lived. Imagine standing on the shore of a prosperous coastal city. The climate is temperate. Trade routes stretch across calm seas. Agriculture thrives in fertile river valleys. Then, over the course of a few generations, or perhaps even faster, the ocean begins to rise, first slowly, then with terrifying acceleration. The ports flood, the lowland farms disappear, the city walls that once stood proudly above the waterline are now submerged. Within a century, everything is gone, drowned beneath hundreds of feet of water. This isn't speculation. Underwater archaeology has revealed exactly such scenarios. Submerged forests with trees still standing, drowned cave systems that were once inhabited, coastal settlements now lying far beneath the waves. The evidence is there, waiting in the deep. And there's another force we must consider, one that ancient texts describe with terrifying consistency: fire from the sky. Across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, stories persist of celestial objects falling to earth, of burning stones that scorched the land, of darkness and fire that consumed entire regions. Modern science has validated these fears. The Tunguska event of 1908 demonstrated what even a relatively small cosmic impact can do, flattening 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest with the force of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. Now imagine something 10 times larger, 100 times larger, striking a populated region of the ancient world. The immediate devastation would be catastrophic, but the secondary effects would be even worse. Wildfires raging across continents, atmospheric debris blocking sunlight, acid rain poisoning water sources, a cascade of environmental collapse that would bring down even the most sophisticated civilization. The crater evidence exists. Lake Basumtwi in Ghana, the Barringer crater in Arizona. Chesapeake Bay. Yes, Chesapeake Bay is itself a massive impact crater. These strikes occurred at different times throughout Earth's history, but they prove that our planet moves through a cosmic shooting gallery. And when a civilization happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, extinction isn't just possible, it's inevitable. What makes these cataclysms truly terrifying isn't their individual power, but their tendency to cascade. A volcanic eruption can trigger climate shifts. Climate shifts can destabilize ice sheets. Collapsing ice sheets can release meltwater pulses. Meltwater pulses can alter ocean currents. Altered ocean currents can intensify storm systems. And all of this happens while civilizations are already weakened, their resources stretched thin, their populations desperate. This is how worlds end. Not with a single blow, but with a sequence of catastrophes that strip away every layer of resilience until nothing remains but scattered survivors and fading memories. And here's what should keep us awake at night. Every mechanism that destroyed previous civilizations still exists. Supervolcanoes still simmer beneath Yellowstone, beneath Indonesia, beneath multiple locations around the globe. The climate system remains inherently unstable, capable of rapid shifts that defy our models. Ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica hold enough water to raise sea levels by dozens of meters, and Earth still orbits through regions of space littered with objects capable of ending civilization as we know it. The question isn't whether these forces will strike again. The question is when, and whether we'll be any better prepared than the 6 civilizations that came before us. If earlier civilizations rose to heights comparable to our own before collapsing, then somewhere in the ruins should lie evidence of their technological achievements. And remarkably, when we look carefully at the fragments that survived, we find exactly that. Hints of capabilities that should not exist in the ancient world. Glimpses of knowledge that seems impossibly advanced for its time. Start with the Baghdad battery, discovered in 1936 near the Iraqi capital. This artifact, a clay jar containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod, dates to approximately 250 BCE. When reconstructed with an acidic solution, it generates an electric current. While mainstream archaeology dismisses it as a curiosity with uncertain purpose, the fact remains: someone in the ancient world created a device capable of producing electricity more than 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta supposedly invented the battery. What was it used for? Electroplating gold onto jewellery, some suggest. But that explanation raises another question. Why would a civilization need electroplating unless they'd already mastered significant metallurgical techniques? Then there's the Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901. For decades, this corroded bronze device puzzled researchers. X-ray analysis finally revealed its true nature, an incredibly sophisticated astronomical calculator with dozens of interlocking gears capable of predicting eclipses, tracking planetary positions, and calculating the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. The mechanism dates to approximately 100 BCE, yet its complexity wouldn't be matched by European clockmakers until the 14th century, 400 years later. This wasn't primitive technology. This was precision engineering requiring advanced mathematical knowledge, skilled metalworking, and an understanding of celestial mechanics that supposedly didn't exist in the ancient world. And it gets stranger. In the ancient Indian city of Dwaraka, the same submerged city mentioned in Sanskrit texts, divers have recovered what appear to be metal objects with characteristics that shouldn't be possible for their age. Some exhibit crystalline structures consistent with rapid cooling techniques not developed until modern times. Others show signs of alloys that require temperatures and methods beyond ancient capabilities. Laboratories that have analysed these objects often fall silent after initial reports. The data doesn't fit the narrative, so it's filed away and forgotten. Consider also the precision of ancient stonework. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, massive stone blocks weighing up to 130 tons are cut with such exactness that their surfaces are flat to within fractions of a millimetre. The joints between stones are so tight that a human hair cannot fit between them. And these aren't soft stones, they're andesite and diorite, among the hardest materials in the world. How were they cut? The standard explanation involves bronze chisels and stone hammers, but experiments attempting to replicate this work with ancient tools have failed spectacularly. Modern archaeologists using Bronze Age technology can barely scratch these stones, let alone shape them with precision that would challenge modern machine tools. Some researchers have proposed the use of advanced abrasives, perhaps diamond-tipped tools or even ultrasonic cutting techniques, but that raises an uncomfortable question. Where did such technology come from? And if ancient peoples possessed it, what else did they have? The same precision appears at other megalithic sites worldwide. In Egypt, the granite boxes in the Serapeum of Saqqara are cut with internal corners so sharp and surfaces so flat that modern metrology experts express astonishment. These aren't crude stone containers. They're precision instruments, created with tolerances that would be impressive in a modern machine shop. And then there are the claims, controversial and often dismissed, of ancient aviation. Sanskrit texts from India describe vimanas, flying machines piloted by gods or advanced beings. The descriptions include technical details, how they're constructed, how they're powered, what materials are used. The Vaimanika Shastra, a 20th century text claiming to be based on ancient sources, provides diagrams and specifications that, while disputed by scholars, contain elements that seem to describe aerodynamic principles. Are these literal descriptions of flying machines, or elaborate metaphors for spiritual journeys? The debate continues, but what's undeniable is this: ancient peoples were describing something, and they were doing so with a level of technical detail that suggests more than mere imagination. Similar accounts appear in other cultures. The biblical prophet Ezekiel describes a wheel within a wheel, descending from the sky with precise geometric characteristics. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of the Anunnaki travelling between heaven and earth. Mayan carvings depict figures in what some interpret as cockpits or control chambers. Again, interpretation varies wildly. But the consistency of these accounts across cultures that never contacted each other suggests something real formed the basis of these stories, even if that reality has been obscured by time and translation. Perhaps most intriguing are the energy systems that ancient sites seem to suggest. Many of the world's greatest megalithic structures sit atop geological features with unusual properties. The Great Pyramid stands at a point of maximum electromagnetic activity on Earth. Stonehenge is surrounded by underground water channels that create specific resonance frequencies. Teotihuacan in Mexico is built above intersecting layers of mica, a mineral that insulates against electric current and is used in modern capacitors. Were these locations chosen randomly? Or did ancient builders understand something about Earth's energy fields that we're only beginning to rediscover? Some researchers have proposed that these structures weren't just monuments, they were machines. Not machines in the modern sense of moving parts and fuel consumption, but systems designed to harness and manipulate natural energies, acoustic resonance, electromagnetic frequencies, piezoelectric effects from compressed quartz in the stones themselves. Experiments have shown that the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid resonates at a frequency that matches the electromagnetic heartbeat of Earth itself, 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance. Is this coincidence or engineering? When you strike certain megalithic stones with the right force, they ring like bells, each stone tuned to a specific frequency. The massive blocks at ancient sites aren't just stacked randomly, they're arranged in patterns that suggest acoustic engineering. Some researchers have demonstrated that sound waves at specific frequencies can actually levitate small objects through harmonic resonance. Could this be how multi-ton blocks were moved? Not through brute force and wooden rollers, but through acoustic levitation, a technology that seems like science fiction but is actually used in modern laboratories today? These questions lead to an uncomfortable realization. The gap between ancient capabilities and modern assumptions may be far wider than we've admitted. If previous civilizations developed along different technological paths, emphasizing acoustic engineering over electronics, biological systems over mechanical ones, geomantic energy over fossil fuels, then their achievements might be nearly invisible to us. We wouldn't recognize their technology because it doesn't look like ours, and if they were destroyed before they could pass on their knowledge in a form that would survive the cataclysm, we'd be left with exactly what we have now: mysterious structures we can't explain, artifacts that don't fit the timeline, and stories that sound like fantasy but might be fragmented memories of something real. The ancient world may have been far more sophisticated than we imagine, and the catastrophes that destroyed it may have erased not just cities and populations, but entire branches of human knowledge that we're only now beginning to glimpse through the ruins they left behind. When the world collapses, not everyone dies. Throughout history, in every great catastrophe, there are always survivors, small groups who escape the devastation through luck, preparation, or the sheer will to endure. These remnants carry with them fragments of the world that was, knowledge that will shape the civilizations that rise from the ashes, but survival isn't the same as preservation. Knowledge is fragile. Without institutions to maintain it, without schools to teach it, without written records to encode it, even the most sophisticated understanding degrades across generations until it becomes myth, then legend, then half-remembered story. This is the tragedy of cyclical collapse, not just that civilizations fall, but that their accumulated wisdom falls with them. Yet some things persist. Some memories prove too important to forget entirely. They survive in oral traditions passed from elder to child across hundreds of generations. They hide in religious rituals whose original meaning has been lost, but whose structure remains intact. They echo in myths that seem to describe impossibilities, until we discover that the impossibilities might have been real. Take the Dogon people of Mali in West Africa. Their cosmology includes detailed knowledge of the Sirius star system, specifically Sirius B, a white dwarf companion star that's invisible to the naked eye, and wasn't detected by Western astronomy until 1862, using advanced telescopes. Yet Dogon oral traditions, which they claim stretch back thousands of years, describe this star, its orbital period, and its density with remarkable accuracy. How did they know? The standard explanation suggests they learned from visiting astronomers in the 20th century and retroactively inserted this knowledge into their traditions. But the Dogon maintain their knowledge is ancient, passed down from sky teachers who came from Sirius in the distant past. Is this evidence of ancient contact with advanced beings? Or is it evidence that an earlier human civilization possessed astronomical knowledge that survived in fragmented form through certain lineages? Either answer challenges our assumptions about the ancient world. The same pattern appears in other cultures. Australian Aboriginal oral traditions describe coastal landscapes now submerged beneath the ocean, descriptions that match geological evidence of coastlines as they existed more than 10,000 years ago. These stories have been passed down through more than 400 generations, preserving geographic memory across an incomprehensible span of time. In the Pacific, Polynesian navigators maintained knowledge of ocean currents, star paths, and island locations across thousands of miles of open water, all without written records, all preserved through oral tradition and practical training. When Europeans encountered these navigators, they couldn't believe humans could navigate so precisely without instruments. Yet the Polynesians had been doing it for millennia, suggesting that oral traditions can preserve complex technical knowledge far longer than we typically assume. What else might have been preserved this way? What other fragments of ancient wisdom might be hiding in plain sight, disguised as mythology or dismissed as superstition? Consider the ancient practice of alchemy. Modern science dismisses it as proto-chemistry mixed with mysticism, medieval charlatans trying to turn lead into gold. But some researchers suggest alchemy was actually a coded system for preserving scientific and philosophical knowledge during times when such knowledge was dangerous to possess openly. The alchemical texts, with their strange symbols and cryptic language, might have been designed to preserve information about metallurgy, chemistry, and even physics in a form that could survive religious persecution and social collapse. The transmutation of lead into gold might have been metaphorical language describing actual chemical processes, encoded to protect the knowledge from those who would suppress it. If this interpretation is correct, then alchemy represents exactly what we'd expect from survivors of an earlier civilization. An attempt to preserve knowledge across a dark age when direct transmission was impossible. The same could be true of other esoteric traditions, Kabbalah with its tree of life diagram, sacred geometry with its precise mathematical relationships, ancient medical systems like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, which describe energy systems in the human body that Western science is only beginning to acknowledge. Are these primitive superstitions, or are they degraded remnants of more sophisticated systems of knowledge, preserved imperfectly across thousands of years? The survivors of each collapse faced an impossible choice. Preserve what they could in whatever form would endure, even if that meant encoding it in ritual, symbol, and story. Even if it meant that future generations would misunderstand it, distort it, or dismiss it entirely. Because some knowledge was better than none. Some memory better than complete forgetting, and so they built monuments aligned to stars, encoding astronomical knowledge in stone that would outlast any book. They created initiation systems, passing secrets from master to student in unbroken chains. They established priesthoods to guard sacred knowledge, even when the knowledge became so corrupted that the priests themselves no longer understood what they were protecting. This is the hidden legacy of the survivors, not in the grand achievements they managed to preserve, but in the desperate measures they took to ensure something, anything, would remain. And here's what this means for us. We are the inheritors of that legacy. The knowledge we possess today isn't built entirely from scratch. It's built on fragments of earlier knowledge that survived through myth, through tradition, through structures we excavate from the earth. We think we're discovering new things, but perhaps we're rediscovering old things. We think we're innovating, but perhaps we're just remembering. If this is true, then our task isn't just to advance forward, it's to look backward, carefully, humbly, with open minds, and ask what else the survivors tried to tell us. What other warnings did they encode in their stories? What other knowledge did they hide in their monuments? Because if the cycle is returning, if we're approaching our own moment of collapse, then we need every scrap of wisdom we can gather from those who survived the last time. We need to become survivors ourselves, not just of the coming catastrophe, but survivors who successfully preserve what matters for the 8th civilization that will rise after we fall. Or perhaps, if we're wise enough and fortunate enough, we can be the civilization that finally breaks the cycle entirely. The ancients encoded their warnings in stone, in myth, in the very layout of their cities. Now we must ask, are we seeing the same warnings in our own time? Are the signs of the coming cycle already visible to those who know how to look? The answer, uncomfortably, appears to be yes. Start with Earth's magnetic field, the invisible shield that protects our planet from solar radiation and cosmic particles. This field isn't static. It fluctuates, weakens, and occasionally reverses entirely, with magnetic north becoming magnetic south, and vice versa. Geological records show this has happened hundreds of times throughout Earth's history, roughly every 200,000 to 300,000 years. The last reversal occurred approximately 780,000 years ago. We're overdue, and the field is currently weakening. Over the past 150 years, the magnetic field has decreased in strength by about 10–15%. In some regions, particularly over the South Atlantic, the field has weakened by 30%. Scientists call this the South Atlantic anomaly, and it's growing. What happens during a magnetic reversal? The field doesn't disappear entirely, but it becomes chaotic with multiple magnetic poles wandering across the planet's surface. During this transition period, which could last hundreds or thousands of years, Earth's protection from cosmic radiation weakens significantly. Satellite systems fail, communication networks collapse. The very infrastructure of modern civilization becomes vulnerable. Ancient civilizations wouldn't have understood magnetic fields in scientific terms, but they would have witnessed the effects: increased radiation, strange auroras at equatorial latitudes, animals behaving erratically as their magnetic navigation systems failed, sky phenomena that would have seemed apocalyptic. If previous civilization collapses coincided with magnetic field disruptions, it would explain the recurring theme of signs in the heavens that appear in so many ancient texts describing the end times. Then there's the climate, changing faster now than at any point in recorded history. Yes, climate change is often discussed in political terms, reduced to debates about human activity and carbon emissions. But step back from the politics and look at the raw data. Global temperatures are rising at a rate unprecedented in the last 10,000 years. Ice sheets are melting faster than models predicted. Ocean currents are slowing. Weather patterns are destabilizing. These aren't just environmental concerns, they're the same warning signs that preceded previous collapses. When the Sahara transformed from grassland to desert, civilizations fell. When the Bronze Age collapsed around 1200 BCE, it followed a period of drought and climate disruption. When the Roman Empire weakened, it coincided with a cold period that disrupted agriculture across Europe. Climate change doesn't directly destroy civilizations, but it destroys the stability upon which civilizations depend. It ruins harvests, triggers migrations, strains resources, and creates the conditions for conflict. It weakens societies until they become vulnerable to the next shock, the next plague, the next invasion, the next catastrophe. And the next catastrophe is always coming. Consider the volcanic threat. Yellowstone's supervolcano last erupted 640,000 years ago. Geological surveys show the magma chamber beneath it is larger than previously thought and continues to accumulate magma. It will erupt again, not might, will. The only question is when. When it does, it will release approximately 1,000 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere, covering much of North America in ash and plunging the world into volcanic winter. Agriculture would fail across multiple continents. Supply chains would collapse. Billions would face starvation. And Yellowstone isn't unique. Mount Toba could erupt again. The Phlegraean fields near Naples are showing increased activity. Volcanic systems around the world are interconnected in ways we don't fully understand, and stress on one can trigger responses in others. Then there's the threat from space, asteroids and comets that could end civilization in an afternoon. We've identified most of the large near-Earth objects that could cause extinction-level events, but most isn't all, and smaller objects, capable of devastating regions or triggering secondary effects, remain largely untracked. The Chelyabinsk meteor that exploded over Russia in 2013 came without warning, releasing energy equivalent to 30 Hiroshima bombs. It was only 20 meters in diameter. An object 100 meters across hitting an ocean could generate tsunamis that would drown coastlines where billions live. An object 500 meters across could trigger an extinction event rivaling anything in Earth's history. And these objects are out there, drifting through the darkness, their orbits occasionally perturbed by gravitational interactions that send them hurtling toward the inner solar system. We have no comprehensive defense system, no proven method of deflecting an incoming asteroid, no way to evacuate populations on the scale that would be necessary. We can only watch and hope we see the threat in time. But perhaps the most insidious threat is one we've created ourselves: systemic fragility. Modern civilization operates on networks, electrical grids, internet infrastructure, supply chains, financial systems. These networks are incredibly efficient, but catastrophically vulnerable. They're optimized for normal conditions with no redundancy, no resilience, no ability to withstand significant disruption. A major solar storm like the Carrington event of 1859 would destroy transformers across the electrical grid, taking months or years to replace. Without electricity, water treatment fails, food refrigeration fails, communication fails, medicine production fails. Modern society could collapse within weeks, not from the storm itself, but from our dependence on systems we can't quickly repair. A pandemic more lethal than COVID-19 could overwhelm medical systems, shut down global travel, collapse economies built on the assumption of constant movement and trade. A cyber attack targeting critical infrastructure could cascade through interconnected systems, bringing down not just computers, but the physical infrastructure those computers control: power plants, water treatment, transportation networks. We've built a civilization of extraordinary capability and equally extraordinary vulnerability. We've concentrated billions of people in coastal cities threatened by rising seas. We've created global supply chains so specialized that disruption in one region cascades worldwide. We've made ourselves dependent on technologies that cease to function if satellites fail, if power grids fall, if the internet collapses. And all of this is happening while the natural cycles continue their inexorable turn. The magnetic field weakens, the climate destabilizes, the volcanoes simmer, the asteroids drift closer. The ancients saw these patterns. They encoded warnings in their monuments and myths. They tried to tell us that the world doesn't progress linearly toward ever greater stability. It cycles, it turns, it rises and falls. We didn't listen because we thought we were different. We thought our technology made us invulnerable. We thought we'd conquered nature and escaped the cycles that governed every previous age. But nature doesn't care what we think. The cycles don't stop because we've stopped believing in them. The warning signs are here. The question is whether we're wise enough to recognize them and brave enough to prepare for what they herald. If this journey into our forgotten past has resonated with you, consider staying with us as we search for what comes next. A like, a share, or a subscription helps this story reach those who may also be looking for answers in the darkness. Thank you for walking with us through the echoes of lost worlds. Until the next night, rest well.